is Alicia Swan with Virtual Properties Realty, and today I am here with a special guest, Mr. Fred Curry of Silverton Mortgage. He's going to give us some information about lending, the lending process, so stay tuned. Can you just give us a quick overview of the lending process, like what it entails? Because I always get questions about that. And as a real estate agent, I
Sure.
don't always like to answer those questions because I always tell
Sure.
them it's not my ministry and I'm not paid to do that. So can you give
Sure.
that information?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me first. So, the lending process essentially begins with really a conversation. It should just be usually I like to have a conversation with a potential buyer just to get a few information pieces of information to understand what kind of what they do, where they are in the process. From there, really the main thing is to actually get everything documented in the form of a loan application. Typically, and things have changed now. Most people don't come into a physical office and sit across the desk or conference room or something like that. But it's been a while since I have done that a few times. If that makes someone feel comfortable. But you have Atlanta is a metro area that's somewhat transient as far as people moving here from other parts of the country. So sometimes that opportunity is just not available, especially in a larger metro area. So a lot of times maybe we're taking the application over the phone, or they can use the online application, which is pretty simple. And what we're doing there is we're just documenting the most recent. We're documenting the current and most recent 2 years of work history and where someone has lived, because those are kind of some of the elements that go into pulling or a credit report. And from there, we are looking to collect the documents, like things like W-2s, pay stubs, and or tax returns, in order to establish the income that you put on the application. And I review it. Typically, once someone finishes an application, I like to, within a day or two, get back with them for at least about 30 minutes and walk through the application, make sure, see if I may have some questions. They're definitely going to have questions. There may be some things that they might have been missing, or things. And usually, walking through the application usually brings those things out. From there, a number of things can happen. They may not qualify because of credit or something like that. But but kind of scooting around that, say they qualify, say the credit is fine. We start to discuss products, programs, things of that nature, in hopes of kind of aligning how much house they're qualified with their expectations for their monthly payment, because that's what's really most important, is where do they want to be, and sort of what the debt to income ratios will allow, given their credit score and given the type of loan they need. And then once we sort of establish that, hopefully we can get them we get send a pre-approval letter to them and the agent, so that they can start buying, so they can start the search process. Typically, and as I'm sure you can talk attest to it, it varies in how long the search process can be. But the pre-approval process really take the pre-approval process, the time it takes really depends on where the person is from an income, credit standpoint, versus their expectations of what they're looking, how much they're looking to purchase. But once they find a house, things can move pretty quickly. That's why I always try to make sure that they're prepared, that they have, if we're not using a down payment assistance program, they have the cash to close, or at least they know where it's coming from. Say if it's a gift from a relative or friend, something like that, we've checked that box, that at least we know where it's coming from. But the actual loan process, once you get under contract, for the most part, unless it's a rehab loan or construction loan, or new construction, whether it's construction to perm or new construction, usually now less than 30 days. probably max 30 days if it's not one of those questions that I not one of those loans that I mentioned. So that's essentially the process kind of at a high level. Everybody's different. So it can be slightly unique, but that's in general, that's kind of how the process looks.
That's good to know. And I'm excited because you said something about 30 days or less.
Yes. Yes, people, and it's kind of exciting because the person who is selling the house gets their money, the person who's buying the house is getting their house, and then the people whose business it is to conduct the transaction, the realtors, the attorneys, everybody, you convert faster, so everybody's happy there.
Yes. So as I told you on the phone when we spoke, I think last week, I looked on your Facebook page and I saw
Mhm.
that you posted about, and which leads me to the next question about down payment assistance. You
Sure,
said that you were working with someone and you closed someone with down payment assistance option that your company provides, right? In
right.
15 days.
Right, right. It was 17 days, which is still really fast. It's kind of crazy
Yes.
fast.
Yes.
So that particular down payment assistance is what's called click and close. It's sort of an internal down payment assistance programs. A number of banks and mortgage companies have those, or where it may not be the company's internal, like I say, like a Chenoa, or where the it's not an internal program, but it is underwritten internally. Down payment assistance programs differ quite a bit. A lot of the housing authority, like your Georgia Dreams, your Invest Atlanta, Atlanta Housing Authority, those kind of programs, it is an outside underwrite. So those particular programs, you can't close them as fast. And sometimes you have to build in, if it's a program that person really wants to do, and you just have to potentially build that program into the contract on time, and then maybe be a discussion as to where is this the right program for you, because because it may make you less competitive. You can speak more to that, but yeah, I have absolutely no problem with down payment assistance. I usually like to tell everybody the ins and outs because I think it's such a catchy thing. I remember before I got into the business that you just think, oh, it's free money. Well, sometimes it can be a true grant, like a forgivable down payment assistance, because most of these programs come in form of a second mortgage that sits on the house until you meet whatever terms that satisfy the forgiveness. To give you an example, our click and close program that I was telling you about, it's
Mhm.
5 years. If you live in the house for 5 years, it's forgiven. If you I think I'm sorry, Chenoa is 3 years. Georgia Dream, Atlanta Housing Authorities is 10 years. Georgia Dreams is not forgivable. It's one of the more well-known programs, but I recently did training and there it's not forgivable. So you have to have in mind that even if you live in that house for however many years, say it's 30 years, or say you pay the mortgage off early, 30 years or whatever. If you go to sell that house, or when you go to sell that house or refinance that mortgage, you will have to pay that, say whether it's the $10,000 or the 12,500, you will have to pay that back. And they don't reduce the amount for the number of years you've lived there. So
Wow.
yeah, yeah. So that's one of the drawbacks. And at least Georgia Dream has a good interest rate. I think right now they're at 6.5, where the rest of the market's at mid to up now upper sevens.
Mhm.
But and most of the programs are like that, where yeah, you wouldn't be able to refinance until you meet the terms for the loan to be forgiven. But just think, you would essentially be stuck with that 6.5% interest rate, or you would have to pay back that 10,000. I'll say if rates drop to the fours again,
Mhm.
may or may not happen. But if that could save you some money, and you're like, you can't do it because you don't want to pay back that money.
Wow. I honestly did not know that about Georgia Dream because I've never
Correct.
done a Georgia Dream transaction
Hmm.
too. But I've
I've
never.
done a few. Yeah, I've done a few. I think the very first one I did, Georgia Dream used to have a program called the Hardest Hit. fund
I think I
where
remember.
you got $15,000,
Mhm.
and they would forgive that $15,000 after 5 years, I believe, and that
Yeah,
was specifically if you bought homes in Fulton, DeKalb, I think it was Henry, DeKalb, Clayton, and Douglas counties
yeah,
because those counties were more impacted by the financial downturn back in 2008. And one of the cool things too, when rates really dropped, so a lot of the people who closed, I had a teammate at the time where there was a lot of those a lot of his customers that he closed on Georgia Dream had rates in the fives, and when rates fell down in the twos and threes, they wanted to refinance. And Georgia Dream actually would allow people who got that hardest hit fund, those funds, to what we call resubordinate
mhm,
the second mortgage, so that where they would not have to pay that money back. But they don't allow that for the program now because the hardest hit fund ran out of money sometime,
yeah.
I think, back in 2020.
Yeah, I remember that because my sister had a transaction. I believe hers was in Clayton or DeKalb. Yeah, so
Okay.
her client was able to benefit from that. So that was my train of thought that okay,
Mm,
you could still it will still be, forgiven or whatever. I did not realize that. So I'm glad you
yeah.
did that. Because I know
Yeah.
a lot of people probably thinking the same thing as me, and I'm a real estate agent, and I'm like blown away. But it's been
Yeah.
a while since I've done a Georgia Dream trend.
Right. Right. It
Training.
had been a while since I had done one too. That's why I went ahead and took the training again so I could refresh my memory.
Oh wow. Okay. So with you said click and close that you have, what are the requirements for that? So I know that would probably be more
Sure.
enticing for people considering like what we've heard about Georgia Dream.
Sure.
What
Sure.
you need to do?
The click and close is, so the forgivable is the minimum credit score is a 650. So there is a repayable option and a forgivable. The forgivable is forgiven after 5 years. The repayable, you would have a small payment associated with that. That would be for 10 years. So that those minimum credit scores are 650. Those are the FHA options. We do have a conventional 100% financing option, and the
Mhm.
minimum credit score there is also a 660
Okay.
as well. So that's another good program. And like I said, for those programs, since we underwrite those in house, there's really no need for additional time to close. You can do your normal whatever you want. If you want to do 21, 24, 30 days without having to extend the closing dates on those.
Well, that's good to know, and it's also important because you can make sure that I guess what I'm trying to say is a lot of times people drag their feet when they're doing things with, sending in documentation and all that good stuff.
Hmm.
Time is of the essence with in
Hmm.
real estate transactions, so they need to make
Totally.
sure that they are sending in their documents on time so that they can close quickly. I mean, that's the whole
Yes.
thing. Yeah. You found the home,
That
now
that
you
makes
into
that
it.
makes all the difference in the world. Um, to talk about timelines. So typically, usually, so from the time that you go on the contract, we want to get you to purchase a home. We want to get you to underwriting pretty quickly. So typically, because and then once you're in underwriting, the turn time should be about 2 business days on that first underwrite. So you should get your conditional approval no more than 48 business hours after it's been submitted to underwriting. And then if you have to, usually we have to go back to underwriting because there are a lot of things that happen. I explained to home buyers, especially first time home buyers, that a lot of things go on behind the scenes that aren't, you're impacted by them, but you don't have to do anything to like title and explain. We explain to them what that means, the appraisal and things like that. And so usually that about that first time we go to underwriting, title and appraisal have been ordered, but they aren't back yet. So we usually have to go back to underwriting at least one more time if we're talking about your typical 3 to 4 week close. That submission, because usually we don't submit it back until we have just about everything we need to get our clear close. And then once we do that, usually that turn time should only be about 24 hours, unless there's every now and then you might have a loan where the underwriter is new or it's a junior underwriter or say if it's a condo or something like that and requires some sort of it triggers a second level review, then that may take maybe one, it should only take maybe one extra day. But usually a lot of times, you're already ahead of schedule. For example, I have a closing on Monday and we got it clear to close today. So there was some
Mhm.
buffer room in there in case something it was taking something a little longer to get back. But you hit the needle on the head. The buyer's responsiveness is critical to making to closing on time. And we as since you and I would both represent the buy in the case of a buying transaction. If you're the buyer's agent, we represent the buyer. So we're, when you're trying to give updates and make sure that the other parties know that everything is going well, going smoothly, if your buyer is unresponsive, that puts you in a bad situation because you don't want to throw your buyer under the bus, but at the same time you're cognizant that there is another person on the side of the transaction. There's a listing agent who represents the seller, and a lot of us who've been on that side before, have some empathy, for the other side of the transaction.